I'm Jamie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing Taskmaster's New Year's treat for 2025. This one starred David James, who is a footballer, Hannah Fry, who is a mathematician and presenter, Martin Lewis, who is a presenter, McNally Blatt, who is a singer, and Sue Johnston, who is an actress. This episode did actually air on the 29th of December rather than like New Year's Day, which is what it normally does. So yeah, a bit earlier than usual, but I thought this was quite nice. It fit nicely into that like no man's land in between Christmas and New Year's Day. So yeah, this was quite good. On to the review of the episode. So this one I thought was a really strong episode. I think the New Year's treats always are quite strong. I always love all the jokes about them not being comedians. So the episode started with a joke about how they're going to refocus it from laughing with comedians to laughing at these contestants. I thought that was quite funny. And then calling Alex a non-comedian as well. So I do think these jokes and Greg like putting everybody down was a really strong start to the episode and like set the scene quite well. So on to the tasks, and the prize task this time was the source of the greatest joy. And this I thought was quite a good one. It again just gave contestants a bit of like free reign to go with whatever they wanted, which I always like, especially for a New Year's treat episode. You don't want anything a bit too restrictive. So yeah, we started off with David very strongly, bringing in like a really good painting of the Taskmaster house. This I thought was really good, not only because the painting was genuinely really impressive and really amazing, but it also like bigs up the show, saying, oh, you know, Taskmaster, the source of the greatest joy, things like that. So I thought it was a very smart prize to bring in, something that complements like Greg and Alex and the show, while also being something that's genuinely impressive. But yeah, this I thought was fantastic, a brilliant start to the prize task. McNally brought in a MasterChef apron. This I think was an all right prize. I thought her story was quite funny, the way she said that she really liked cooking and wanted to win but didn't win, and then went to do it again and lost that one as well. So I thought that was all quite funny, and Greg questioning her about like, you know, what's your specialty? She just says all of it. Like, I just thought, even though the prize wasn't that good, the story behind it, the banter around it was quite good. So I did really enjoy it. Martin brought in quite a controversial item, and this was the House of Games deck chair. I love the House of Games, but I thought this was quite a dumb move. I get where he was going with it by arguing that I'm giving up something that I like in hopes to win a prize from an even better show. But I thought saying a prize from a competing game show is the source of his greatest joy, probably not the smartest idea. I do quite like it. I thought it was quite funny to bring in, and I really liked Greg's remarks about Richard as well. So yeah, overall I enjoyed it, but yeah, not the strongest prize to bring in, and I'm not surprised that it scored quite low. However, I did really enjoy Martin's like schooling Alex about the terms and conditions of his prizes and things like that. As Greg said, he really out-nerded him. But yeah, that was all very funny. Sue brought in an old photo of her mum with Paul McCartney and two other people as well. And this was very sweet. I think she definitely pulled on the heartstrings a lot, which I think was quite smart. Yeah, it was a genuinely nice prize, and saying, you know, like her mum's source of her greatest joy, things like that, you know, all very nice. And yeah, I'm not surprised this one scored highly. I thought she was very smart to bring in a very sentimental, emotional item for this prize category. Then we had Hannah, who brought in a prize that I don't think we've ever seen anything like before, and this was a lion's ovary. Now, I'm not surprised she brought in something like scientific and things like that, but I liked the play with words here. So she thought pride is pride of lions, so lion ovary, and then ovaries, you know, being like the source of new life. So yeah, literally bursting with pride. So I thought the wordplay was incredible. The item was very cool. Like, why would that be a prize that you could win on a game show? It's just very fun. So yeah, this I thought was really good. I liked the kind of debate about it, whether or not it was a pride because it was only one lion, you know, little things like that. Very strong prize. And I personally do agree with how Greg scored this one. So he gave 1 point to Martin, which is not surprising, 2 points to McNally, which I agree with. He then jumped up to 4 points and gave the 4 points to Hannah, which again I think is quite strong. I think there is like quite a distinction between Martin and McNally's and the other three. I think the other three's prizes are a lot better. So yeah, I think 4 points is fair for Hannah, and then he gave 5 points to Sue and to David, which I think I agree with. I think, as I said, Sue's is very sentimental, very emotional, so I definitely understand why he did give 5 points for that. And David's was genuinely really impressive and really cool. Maybe Hannah should have got 5 as well, but I do think David's is probably my favourite one out of all the prizes. On to the first proper task, and this one was a 2-parter. And the first part, which we didn't know at the time, was to don as many gloves as possible. Now, reading that task, hearing that task, I immediately thought there's going to be a second part to this, and I'm surprised not many people figured that out, even though Martin said that one thing he was told about when coming onto the show was to turn over the task to see if there's anything written there, and he didn't do that, and neither did anybody else apart from 2 people, which we'll talk about later. On a little note, I love that there's always somebody who can't open a briefcase. I think it's really funny, just like a little running joke that they're not meaning to happen, just there's always somebody who can't open it. Just really funny. So we saw David, Martin and Melanie's attempts first, and these were the 3 people who didn't realise it was a double 2-parter task. So I do think everybody had some fairly decent tactics with this. So David put all the gloves on one hand and like a couple in other places as well. But I do actually think that was quite a smart move for the task, not including the second part, you know. But with the first one, it's because you always had one working hand, so you could put the gloves on a lot quicker, rather than like having the gloves on both hands, which would make it more difficult to put the gloves on. So like, I think that was quite a smart idea. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him, but as I said, I there was some good reasoning behind it. Martin also had a little workaround where he just put the gloves all over his body, saying that counted as donning. I'm like 50-50 on this. I do think that some of them definitely counted as being donned, but I do think some were a little bit like dubious really. But I don't necessarily think he should have been disqualified or anything like that. And then Melanie went the very classic approach and just put the gloves on her hands, which I definitely feel maybe worked a little bit more in her, well, could have worked a little bit more in her favour for the second part of the task, because you're not really that disadvantaged by having loads of gloves on your hands, whereas David was more disadvantaged by it. It didn't work out that way because Melanie did drop her glass of sand, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, I do think that could have been an advantage for her if she'd kind of played it correctly. So as we saw when the second part of the task was revealed, they had to hold 2 like cocktail glasses in their hands and then take off all the gloves and put them back in the briefcase. I do think this was quite a smart twist, even though, as I said, I did see it coming, because I do think like they're not just going to put on gloves and that be the end of it. There had to be a second part. This I thought was quite good. I thought the balancing, like the holding of the cocktail glasses, not being able to put them down, was quite smart, because you'd have to think of workarounds of how you could hold them in a way that you wouldn't drop too much sand, because you did get a time penalty for each gram of sand that you lost. I do think that David was very unfortunate with this, having to like balance the glass on his fist that was just covered with all the gloves. But I'm surprised he didn't lose this one really. But yeah, just Melanie dropped her glass. I think David dropped that one as well. So they both lost half of their sand immediately. But I do think because David could basically hold one glass now that he'd lost the other one, and then just take off all the gloves at once pretty much on his one hand, did work in his favour. Martin as well had a fairly easy-ish attempt at this because he could just take out all the gloves from his pockets. He did have to move around a bit more, which could have been disastrous, but it wasn't really. And yeah, unfortunately, Melanie dropped a lot of her sand, so did lose this task. We then saw Sue and Hannah, who both realised that this task wasn't the only thing they had to do. So Sue actually found it by reading the back of the task, which is quite smart. And then Hannah found it by thinking she could do something with the hand that was on the side, and managed to see that there was a second part. Neither of them perhaps used this to their advantage as much as they could have done. They did both do very well compared to the others. Like Hannah won this task and Sue came second. But I definitely feel like they could have done a bit better with it. So Sue saw the back of the task and then took out all the gloves from the briefcase before finding where the second part of the task was hidden, or where she thought the real task was hidden really. So by revealing that, she then had to put all the gloves back in while holding the 2 glasses, which is unfortunate. Like she wasn't able to know that, but yeah, just quite unfortunate. And then Hannah found the second part without realising that the first part wasn't part of the task, so she didn't have to do anything. So yeah, that was unfortunate. I definitely understand why she did that. You might think you might get disqualified if you haven't done the first part because she didn't know it wasn't part of the task. So I definitely understand that. It's just a shame that she couldn't have made it work completely in her favour. So as I said, Hannah won this task and got 5 points. Sue came second and got 4. Then in third place we have Martin, second is David, and then unfortunately McNally only got 1 point, but I guess that is kind of good because she didn't put all the gloves back in the box, so they could have disqualified her, but I do think it was nice not to, especially for like a 1 episode special, and also she did come last anyway, so it's only 1 point difference really. The second task in this episode was to do something you regret. Biggest regret wins, and I feel like a lot of the times in the special ones they always have like a fairly like high stakes task, and this time it was to do the thing that you'd regret the most. And yeah, there's lots of different things you could have gone down with this, and I thought we had some very fun attempts from everybody. I liked it starting off with like David's story about his puffin that he had, and then we saw like Hannah's smashed bird, so we were like, oh okay, something happened to that bird at some point. But yeah, I thought this task was quite fun. It gave the contestants a lot of freedom to do whatever they wanted, how they could have gone really creative, they could have gone like fairly simple and very classic attempt, which a few people did. But yeah, I thought everyone's attempts was quite good. So we had Martin, who decided that the thing that he'd regret the most was taking his watch off that counts as steps and walking around without those steps being counted. And this doesn't seem very high stakes, but you could see how much he like genuinely hated it, how much it was irritating him, and how much he regretted it. So I thought this was quite funny and like just a bit like shocking. Like you wouldn't, I mean, I'm not that surprised that he's very into like his analytics and statistics and things like that because of who he is. But I do think it was a bit shocking to be like, oh my God, this man cannot take off his watch. Like he has it on constantly. And I liked, Greg saying your poor wife, but if you did see, there was an outtake where his wife is just as nerdy as him. So they fit together very well. But yeah, I thought this was a really funny attempt and yeah, just a bit like bewildering really. We then had Hannah, who I thought went a very classic approach, and this was to put a bunch of hot sauce and other things onto a birthday cake that she found, and then she ate it with Alex. And I do think involving Alex in this is quite fun. I always like it when Alex gets involved, and it's nice that, a contestant who's just doing it for 1 episode is really engaging with that as well and getting Alex involved. It did look awful. It would have been horrible. The hot sauces looked very, very spicy. I don't think I would have coped. But yeah, I think this is a very smart one to do. I think it is something that you genuinely would regret, and it's quite fun. And you get like a bit messy. You get to getting Alex involved. I thought this was a really good attempt. I did think her questioning whether or not she can drink the toilet water, I'm glad she didn't do that, like for her sake. But I think she definitely would have won if she did that, because that would have genuinely been horrible and probably one of the most disgusting things that's happened on the show. Another thing I liked about Hannah's was Alex revealing that cake was going to go home to his children, and Hannah ruined that. But I think obviously that worked in Hannah's favour because that was something else that she regretted about her attempt. So yeah, very, very strong effort in my opinion. David's attempt, even though I thought it was quite funny, definitely wasn't the strongest, and his thing was just smashing the bird on the table. I did really enjoy, him saying how awful he felt, how much he regretted it, and then right before the timer went doing it again. So obviously reversing all of that regret and everything like that. So yeah, I definitely don't think this is very strong. I think he definitely could have done a lot more with this. I think maybe if it had been a real taxidermied bird, then maybe it would have been a bit more regretful. But yeah, I just thought it was quite a weak attempt. We then had Sue, who thought the thing that she hates the most was like showing her feet, and she never wanted to do that. And so her thing that she decided to do was to show her feet on camera. I definitely understand why she would hate this, but I do think that even though she's saying her feet were the ugliest thing ever, they seemed fine, as Greg said. I definitely agree with that, but I definitely understand that insecurity, just have something that you hate and then putting that on camera for everybody to see. I definitely understand why she would dislike that, and yeah, she seemed to be very uncomfortable with it, and it seemed to be something that she hated. So yeah, I definitely agree with giving her 5 points. Like, she seemed to be having an awful time with this. You could definitely see the real regret, like, building and building. So yeah, 5 points I think is well deserved. We then had Mel, who decided to kiss Alex. She worked through a few different options, like drinking tequila, things like that. But yeah, she decided that she was going to kiss Alex, which I thought was really funny. Again, it's something that gets Alex involved, and also, you know, it's a little bit more belittling to him by saying, oh, I instantly regret that, like, oh, it was the worst decision, and things like that. So it definitely plays into that, and I think Greg was perhaps a little bit harsh. I do think 2 points is quite low. Alex is not a bad guy, but, you know, you're kissing somebody that you've basically like just met. I don't know. I feel like maybe 2's a bit harsh. I do agree with everybody else's scorings though. So David getting 1, Hannah getting 3, Martin getting 4 because you could genuinely see how regretful he was and how much he hated it, and then Sue getting 5. So I agree with all that. I just think, I don't know what I would have done. Maybe given her Mel an extra point, like bumped her up to 3 or something, because yeah, I think it is like quite a big thing to do. I don't know. The final proper task in this episode was to put the water from the bucket into the bottle. And obvious rules that you can't touch them, you can't move them. And then there was this bonus thing where you had to use a specific tool to do it. There were 5 buckets and you had to pick one and you had to decide whether or not you wanted to use it. If you used it, you had to stick with that one, but you could swap it and kind of gamble and try and get a better item on your second or even third if you wanted to go to 3 attempts. So we started off seeing David and Martin's attempts. So David picked the gloves and kind of misunderstood the rules and used them immediately, thinking, oh, I'll use them for a bit and then I'll swap them. But he had to keep using the gloves. And I definitely understand why you might think they're okay because, you know, they can absorb water. You just pick it up, squeeze it in. Like, there's things you could do with them. They're not completely useless, but yeah, he immediately used them. As I said, there's things you could have done with it, and I think you could definitely fill it up a little bit, as we see with Martin. But yeah, he decided to move the table over to the bucket and put the water in with the gloves that way. As soon as he did it, I was like, well, he's going to get disqualified because they've done this thing before. You're moving the bottle, even if you're just moving the table. If you're not touching it, you're still moving it. I'm not surprised he was disqualified. It was 100% moving it, even though he just tried to argue about the atoms, they're always moving, things like that. But yeah, 100% should have been disqualified. But I like that he was almost like arguing for it as he was leaving as well. You could hear on his microphone, so he knew it was iffy, and yeah, I think disqualification is very fair for this one. Martin at first picked up a little ramekin, and swapping that was a real mistake. I think the ramekin was probably the best item out of all of them. So yeah, I don't know why he swapped, but I guess you just think there could be something better, because I think even though we see how well the pipe worked, the ramekin doesn't really involve any skill. It's pure fill it up, put it in, fill it up, put it in. And I think that is the best option for this one, especially because you've only got 5 minutes. So yeah, I know he regretted moving it because he did get the gloves. You do lose 30 seconds when you wait for the next item. So yeah, he got the gloves and he did manage to fill it about halfway, which I thought was pretty impressive. I think, yeah, using the gloves, he definitely got a lot of steps in, as he pointed out. But yeah, I think he did a real good job with this, considering the less time and the using the gloves. So yeah, pretty good. We then saw Sue, Melanie and Hannah, who all eventually ended up with the same item. Sue picked up the teaspoon first, and as I said, I think swapping that is a smart idea. I think it's so little amount of water that you can hold in a teaspoon. So I think swapping that is a good idea. And then she got the tube. She decided to use this tube basically by like sucking out some water with it, and then tipping it in to the bottle and also spitting the remaining water out as well. So again, a little bit iffy about whether or not that counts, but I think you are technically kind of like using it. I don't know. It's tricky, that one. I think it's not as black and white as David moving the table. So yeah, I know probably some people think that it doesn't count, but again, I don't really know. I don't think it's that bad of a thing to do. We then had Melanie, who also got the tube on her first try this time, and she decided to basically just use it as something to hold the water with. So she would suck the water out with the tube, hold it in the tube and then like just tip it out. And yeah, definitely not using the tube the way that it was intended. It was intended to like siphon it basically. But I thought this was a pretty good approach. Again, you don't really need to have any skill involved. It's literally just filling it up and taking it. So in the same sense, I guess, as I said about the little ramekin, yeah, it's just about speed and getting as much water in as you can. And just continually doing that. Like not really messing around too much with trying to do something smart or trying to do something that's like technical and complicated. You just running around filling it up as quickly as you can. Hannah also picked the gloves and she decided to swap, and she got the tube as well. And she, having a PhD in fluid dynamics, knew how to work a siphon. So she got it working, or she called it grand tubing or something like that. So she got that working, which is really impressive. It's nice to actually see somebody be able to do it, because we've seen people try again and again and again. Even from the very first season of Taskmaster, when they had to empty the bathtub, people have been trying to make this work. So it's nice to see somebody do it very successfully. It is really impressive to see. So she did get the bottle filled up completely, which was really cool. But unfortunately, she did touch the bottle a lot, trying to get the tube in and like knocking it over, things like that. So as I kind of mentioned before with like Melanie, sometimes just simple is better. Trying to mess around with complicated little systems and things like that, even though you might get good results, there's just an increased risk of being disqualified. So yeah, unfortunately, Hannah got disqualified and so did David. So this meant that Martin got 3 points, which I thought was pretty good for him. 4 points to Sue and then 5 points for Melanie. We then have the studio task, and this I thought was a really strong studio task. Unfortunately for the previous season, I thought the studio tasks were a bit hit or miss. I thought some of them were quite weak, and I think for a singular episode you have to have a really strong studio task, because it's all about bringing them together. It's their one time to go on stage and do something in front of the live audience, so it had to be a good task, and I think the studio task that they went with was really strong. So this one was to draw the most accurate picture of what was in the box. They had to answer a question right to be able to look in the box, and they only had like 0.1 seconds to look in the box for like a flash of light. Pretty tricky, I think. And also, if you got the question wrong, then you had to start your drawing all over again. Overall, I think this was a pretty fun task. I liked that it's a bit more difficult than other drawing tasks. It doesn't rely purely on your drawing skill, but rather like how quick you are answering questions, how good you are answering the questions, also a little bit of luck, because it basically was like 50-50 if you don't know. Also how much information you can take in quickly by looking at the drawings. And also a little bit of like gambling, whether or not you do risk answering another question to have another look, or you could have to start again. So I do think this is a very strong task. It allowed the contestants to get really competitive. Melanie answered a lot of questions. They were fighting over whether or not who was answering the question. Unfortunately, Sue took ages before she actually was able to answer a question, and that was quite funny. You do feel quite bad for her, but I like that she just decided to draw Greg. And yeah, she only actually ended up having 20 seconds in the end to draw what was in the box, because she got the last question. And yeah, Melanie had to start all over again. Just very risky, I think, that way. I think she should have just stuck with what she had. I definitely get the tactic, thinking, oh, if I keep answering the questions, then nobody else can get another look at what's in the box. So yeah, risky, and yeah, unfortunately it didn't pay off for her because she did have to start again very late on in the game. But yeah, overall, I thought this was quite fun, and then obviously seeing everybody's paintings at the end. And I do agree with all of the scorings. I think Sue definitely gets 1, she just wasn't able to do much drawing at all. Mel at 2 points, agree with that as well. Martin at 3, and then Hannah and David, I think they were both really strong. And I do agree maybe that David's was better than Hannah's. Obviously, this is where your natural artistic ability does play a part in how well you can do. But I do agree that David's was a bit more accurate with certain things, and did look like the person in the box. So after all these tasks, the winner of Taskmaster's New Year's treat was Sue, and I think this is quite well deserved. I think she had quite a good effort throughout all the tasks, obviously losing the last task as well. So I think that's quite impressive and just shows how well she did in all the other tasks. So yeah, overall, this was a very, very strong episode. I feel like a full series would work really well with all the contestants. They all brought something fun and new to the table and different. So that I really liked. There was lots of laughs, even some running jokes, like Martin with the steps, David with the puffin, joking about Hannah's like PhD and things like that. And also the jokes that were before the ad break. So Greg saying like if you're doing, what was it, dry January, keto, and like training for a marathon, that you're just boring and stop talking about it. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. It cracked me up every single time. I thought, yeah, it was just so good. And also I thought a really strong relationship between all the contestants. They were all like seemed very friendly with each other. They seemed, you know, they were kind of picking on each other occasionally, backing each other up, like joking with each other. I think it felt to me like the studio environment you'd perhaps get like halfway through a series of like a proper one, but we had that in just a singular episode. I don't know whether it's just because everyone's so excited to be there and it's just something fun you do for one episode. I just thought it was a really good episode. I think they are doing such a good job with these New Year treats. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, then please leave a like. It really helps the channel, and comment down below your thoughts on this episode. Did you enjoy it as much as I did? And subscribe if you want to see more videos to do with Taskmaster. I'll have some more out for you soon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!